Hello, this is Kihoo, a climate storyteller, and welcome to the commentary video for episode 3. In our last video, we saw the members of the Ministry for the Future panicking over the enormous cost of climate change, but realizing that changing the law is the only real leverage they have. Meanwhile, India began experimenting with the solar radiation management, and Frank from episode 1 was finally rescued from the deadly heat wave that had already claimed the lives of his friends and neighbors. In today's video, we will explore why climate change isn't just an environmental problem, it's set to become the worst economic crisis in the human history. According to the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, climate change could slash 17% of the global GDP by mid-century. The Stern Review warns that the GDP loss could increase by 5% every year if we fail to act. Some countries vulnerable to climate disaster will suffer more, above 10% GDP loss than the other regions. This is way worse than the Great Depression that affected about 15% of the global GDP. In 2023, the World Economic Forum has calculated that this would mean the global cost of climate change damage is estimated to be between $1.7 trillion and $3.1 trillion per year by 2050. That breaks down to about $16.3 million per hour. So here's the crucial difference between Great Depression and the climate crisis. Unlike the Great Depression or the 2008 financial crisis, the damage from climate change is irreversible. We can't bring back life of the species that extincted from a rapidly changing climate change caused by human activities, and we cannot bring back the Antarctica that has wholly melted from the climate change. And above all, we cannot bring back the loss made during the heat wave and the hurricane. So do you know that even though we stop emitting greenhouse gas emissions today, this cannot stop us from our tragedy? That's because the gases we are already pumping into the atmosphere stick around for a long time. Scientists call this the global warming potential that compares how much heat a greenhouse gas emissions will be trapped in the atmosphere compared to the carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide, by definition, CO2 has a GWP of 1, but methane is about 30 times more powerful. So nitrous oxide, the nitrogen, mostly from the agriculture, is nearly 300 times stronger and can persist over a century. The good news is that we can minimize the GDP loss to single digit and keep the cost of measures manageable by taking an immediate climate mitigation and climate adaptation measures. It's simple than it sounds. So climate mitigation is about actions or activities that use less energy and resulting to less greenhouse gas emissions. For example, one of the largest global emissions comes from a building sector. We can reduce emissions by using electricity from renewable energy or insulate the walls, windows, and ventilation that use less energy throughout the different seasons. Or you could choose to remodel by using the recycling materials that whichever comes into the less carbon footprint. And climate adaptation is about adapting ourselves to actual or expected climate change impacts. We are already rapidly adapting to extreme heat by turning on the air conditioner. However, this is unsustainable as we've learned from the first episode. Click the link above to learn more about it. So to fight the heat, for example, you might have noticed that many city councils installing a public cooling shelters to avoid the sun and to keep you hydrated. And this is part of the adaptation measures. In part 2, we will revisit the glaciologist statement about the melting glaciers.
The glaciers are collapsing into the sea. 2 meters of sea level rise is now certain 6 as possible. That's the end of every coastal city, beach, marsh, coral reef, and countless fisheries. Civilization, as we know it, is kaput.
The glaciers are melting at an alarming pace because greenhouse gases are trapping more and more heat in our atmosphere. Earlier this year, NASA announced that global sea levels are now rising at double the speed compared to 3 decades ago. In 1993, the rate was about 2.1 millimeters per year. By 2024, it had jumped to 4.5 millimeters per year. This is a shocking acceleration. So why is this so disastrous? So think of Antarctica as a colossal frozen reservoir, holding a 60% to 70% of the world's fresh water. As the ice melts, massive amounts of fresh water flow into the ocean, and this is a death sentence to our biodiversity and to the humankind. As the sea level rises from the Antarctica melts, it means more seawater seeps into our soil, and it is common sense that you cannot grow any crops with the salt water. It also contaminates the rivers and groundwaters, leaving us with a scarcer drinking water and lower food production. As the massive freshwater enters the oceans and the vice versa, species in seawater and freshwater will die off. For instance, rising seas accelerate the coral reef extinction, and without the reefs, we lose the quarter of all marine life. We are going to use this climate central simulation, imagining that we lost Antarctica. This is a climate simulation from Climate Central that shows how our geography will change from Antarctic ice loss. I've set the ice sheet to Antarctica. When Antarctica entirely melts, it is expected to be about 60 meters sea level rise. As you can see, coastal cities such as Miami and the surrounding cities New York, Mississippi, the beautiful Cuba, and the parts in Latin America will be in danger. And island countries like UK, Ireland, and the countries with a territory adjacent to the oceans like Denmark, Netherlands are likely to be underwater by the end of the century. If you go to Asia, Japan as an island countries will be experience a significant intrusion of seawater to the territory, and also China with lots of coastal cities like Qingdao, Shanghai, and down here you can see the particular countries like Bangladesh, Cambodia, another island country, Singapore, Philippines, and others will be endangered. Not only cities that are likely to submerge, like coastal cities, this is an alarming issue for major cities near the coastal zones, like New York, Miami, Jakarta, Shanghai, and including my hometown. And as we all know, all the airports, seaports, and especially nuclear power plants needs a lot of water, and the key in social infrastructures are also located near the sea for many different reasons. And you can see the level of sea level rise will cause irreparable damage to our infrastructure and the society. So as we've learned from the previous video, this is why insurance sectors are actively adopting a climate stress testing and revising their insurance policy. Not only insurance sector, real estate sectors are on the front lines of a climate risk, especially with the sea level rise. So imagine this, you've just bought a house in Manhattan in New York for $10 million. This is your 10-year saving and you are excited to have your house for the first time. Soon after, your house was flooded and your dream house is sinking from the sea level rise. You have instantly lost so much money, and the real estate market already started to rate your house much lower than what you've paid for. And insurance companies started to ask for a ridiculous amount of money for the insurance premium if I want to continue my housing insurance. To make it worse, your bank suddenly refused to finance the repairs unless you put down the even more money for their financial stability. The worst thing is that the flood started to come every 2 years and the cycle is getting shorter. You would like to make the flood barriers around your house to reduce the damage, but it just takes so much more money to maintain your property anymore. So real estate sectors are already running a climate risk analysis to prevent the flood, heat, wildfire risk, and shifting the developments away from the high-risk coastal zone. Unfortunately, already properties in flood-prone areas and coastal properties are already seeing the reduced demand and lower resale values. A study from the University of South Florida found that commercial properties exposed to the sea level rise are already sold at a slightly discounted rate, and the discount rate is increasing over time. The coastal cities like Sydney, Barcelona, Cape Town, and LA are no longer considered as prime assets. They are rather being reclassified as what experts now call it as a stranded assets. There are tools from Climate Check, Climate X, and XDI, and others that could assess your properties in danger. If you plan to buy a house in next 5 to 10 years, you might want to assess climate risk of the properties that you're interested in now. We are going to have a look at Climate Check. So I put the address to California, and it shows the 4 major climate risk in this region. You can tell that California region has extreme drought risk, very high heat risk, significant flood risk, but relatively low precipitation risk. And this is why it's crucial for both buyers and sellers in the real estate market to actively assess a climate risk. The research already warns that this risk are not fully priced into housing markets. In fact, in the US alone, the residential properties exposed to flood risk are estimated to be overvalued by more than $120 billion. So the message is clear: the worst economic crisis is coming. The more we understand about the climate risk, the more we can act, and together we can prevent the worst financial crisis. So thank you for watching video, and if you want to learn more about climate change, please stay tuned and bye.